Hi, welcome to week 61. It's been quite a quiet week actually for me this week. We've been on holiday with Bex's family, did a couple of runs, had a bit of chill, but I've also treated it as a bit of a recovery week, ready to go into a test week this week. Because it's the end of the month, I need to do my 5k run time and my 20k bike time trial. And I've also been trying to think about how I can keep measuring my swim speed, but obviously without constantly having to do really long distances at quite high intensity, because I think I'll get quite boring. So I think I'm just going to do a CSS test tonight, just to see kind of where things are at and kind of keep an eye on my swim times from the CSS test. Anyway, here's a bit of a montage of some running and some swimming in Exmouth that I did this week, and a little bit of the family holiday. So this week things should be a little bit more kind of back into the routine that they originally were. I've made some notes on this week's kind of topic really, because I kind of went a bit in depth on looking at adversity and the idea of being able to deal with adversity. The idea of talking about this week cropped up because of two things really. One, the Outlaw Triathlon had some horrendous weather, and I think they did the swim section, and then by the time they were ready to go out on the bike, they'd cancelled the bike, and then they had to do a standalone marathon. So I really felt for all those athletes that had kind of trained to do the full distance, and obviously that was kind of cut short. And it's just that mental thing, how do you deal with stuff like that? And obviously in training and racing we have all these things that we have to deal with from time to time, and ultimately it's adversity that we're trying to deal with, whether it's a change in the course like they happened at the Outlaw, or whether it's your goggles snapping, or perhaps it's the weather like it's been recently. There's a couple of races that have become non-wetsuit swims when people have trained in wetsuits. So there are an awful lot of things that can kind of cause us to have to rethink what we're doing. Obviously, I've had my fair share this year with injuries and trying to deal with that, and I've actually surprised myself in the positivity of how I've approached it all. And the topic of adversity is in a book called The Talent Lab, which I've read recently. There was a section in there where they did a massive study called the GBM study, which is the Great British Medal Study, which was led by UK Sport but also several other universities. And they spent 3.5 years, let me get my facts right here, I want to make sure I get this, 3.5 years studying these elites and super elite athletes, 1,400 hours of interviews. What they did essentially was they found some super elites, and what they classified super elites were people that had won multiple medals at world level. So essentially people that had repeatedly achieved high levels, and they also had what they classed as elite level athletes. Now, the idea of this was that the trajectory of the elites and the super elites was very similar until they got to a world-class standard. So they twinned them up. They'd have one super elite who, when they got to world standard, went up, and they had an elite that had the same trajectory and the same experiences and the same opportunities, whose careers went downhill when they got to that world-class level. So they could compare these two athletes to each other up to a specific point. Now, there were some very interesting questions they asked, where a majority of the super elites had something in common, and so did the elites. There's a definite differentiation, and it's all in the book. The one thing that I was particularly interested in was that out of the 16 super elite athletes, absolutely every single one of them, and I'll read this as a quote, reported experiencing a significant negative critical event during their primary developmental years. So every single one of them had had some kind of case of adversity, like a dysfunctional or a broken family or home, bullying, sibling dominance, family experiencing life life-threatening disease or death of the parent, family suicide attempts, those kind of things where in their developmental years they'd had some sort of level of adversity. Whereas with the elite athletes, only 4 out of the 16 reported having a situation in their lives like this. What they kind of went on to show was that when parents kind of do everything for their children, they kind of don't develop any of these abilities to deal with adversity. So I started looking at some athletes to see how they've dealt with different kind of situations in their careers, and I've kind of pulled up these 4 different examples of athletes kind of dealing with adversity in different ways. And I think it's interesting to see how there's a difference to the type of adversity that you have. Obviously, some of them are kind of more terminal. The race is over at that point. But there are other examples in here, in my opinion, where they could have coped with these scenarios in a better way. And it's interesting to know whether that's maybe the reason why their careers have faltered. Who knows? Anyway, here are my 4 examples. 2012, Sun Yang at the Olympics in London, 1500 metre swimming final. He was disrupted by a sound in the crowd and false started. Now, he should have been disqualified, but because it was a sound from the crowd, he was allowed to continue. Because he was able to deal with that adversity, he managed to knock 3.12 seconds off the world record, coming in at a crazy 14:31. Now here we have David Miller, one of my favourite time trialists and cyclists of all time. In 2008 at the Giro, stage 5. He's chain snapped within sight of the finish line. He was basically the strongest rider there. Chain snapped, and this is how he dealt with it. And here we have Mo Farah in 2018 at the London Marathon. Now, this is an interesting scenario where his problem was entirely created by not knowing where his water bottle was. Initially, there was a bit of confusion. He actually vented at some photographers on the motorbike, saying, you know, can you get the staff under control, get them to help us out a little bit. But actually, if you watch this second clip, you can see the staff members were pointing at the correct bottle and he still picked up the wrong one. So, you know, this is an issue with him kind of dealing with a relatively minor problem that could have been dealt with quite easily. And finally, a triathlon-related one. Chrissie Wellington, the 2008 Kona. She had a 5-minute lead going onto the bike when she had a flat tyre. Now, that shouldn't have been a problem, but there was obviously a problem with her being able to use her CO2 cylinder, which, you know, most of us have had problems in the past with it. You'd think that this shouldn't be a problem, but her cylinder actually released before she put it onto the wheel, which left her without any air. And luckily for her, the message got back through the bike riders to a cyclist called Rebecca Keat, who gave her a CO2 cylinder. And by the time she actually managed to get back on the bike, she was 10 minutes down, but she still came in to win. So what have I taken from my kind of notes and my thoughts on this? Well, one really is this idea of trying to build some level of adversity, some kind of resilience development into training, something where stuff doesn't go to plan, and visualizing kind of scenarios where you've got to change tyres, or if you get a puncture, or being able to swim open water without goggles, any of those kind of things where you can kind of build a level of resilience into your kind of training is a good idea. Anyway, I mean, that was kind of all I've been thinking about this week, mainly because I've been sat around not doing very much. So next week's video is going to be more about me trying to hit the target times for July. It'd be great if you could subscribe to the channel. There's some more videos that are around on here. Hit the like button. If you hit the notification bell, it should tell you that when I upload a video each Monday. Like I say, sometimes the videos will be about things like this, kind of looking into things to build into your training. Sometimes it'll be more about what I've been up to in my training, kind of more specifically. Anyway, have a good week, and I'll see you in week 62.